Canned salmon sits in almost every American pantry over 60, but should it? A tin of salmon sells for roughly $3, and it promises calcium, omega-3 fats, vitamin D, and protein inside a single can that survives on the shelf for years. Yet every few months, fresh headlines warn about mercury, plastic linings, sodium, or some new threat hiding inside that small metal tin. So which version of the story is actually true? Does canned salmon stand as one of the most underrated foods on the grocery shelf for people over 60? Or does it quietly damage the health of millions of seniors who eat it 2 or 3 times a week without ever questioning what sits inside? Today we answer that question using the actual science, the actual numbers, and the kind of side-by-side comparisons that almost no one shows you on television or social media. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly when canned salmon supports your body, especially in preventing cardiovascular disease, sarcopenia, and cognitive decline, when it works against it, and how to separate the right can from the wrong one in less than 10 seconds at any grocery store. Let us begin with the single biggest fear surrounding canned fish, which is mercury contamination. After our recent video on canned tuna, hundreds of you wrote in asking whether canned salmon carried the same risks. The honest answer surprised even our research team. Monitoring data from the Food and Drug Administration shows that canned salmon contains roughly 1/100th of 1 part per million of mercury, which sounds abstract until you compare it to other options. Canned light tuna measures about 9 times higher, and canned albacore tuna, the variety most shoppers consider the premium choice, registers around 25 times the mercury found inside a typical can of salmon. That gap is not a rounding error. Salmon lives a short life feeding low on the food chain, eating mostly tiny shrimp and small ocean creatures, while tuna grows into a long-lived predator that hunts other fish and accumulates mercury across years of feeding higher up. By the time a tuna reaches the size needed for canning, it has been collecting mercury for most of its life, while a salmon gets harvested young and biologically clean. This explains why the Food and Drug Administration places salmon on its short list of best choice seafood and recommends eating it 2 to 3 times per week, even for pregnant women and small children. Canned light tuna earns the same designation only with caution attached, and albacore tuna drops down to a more restricted category. Salmon holds the top tier. On the question of mercury alone, the verdict already settles itself. Canned salmon ranks among the safest fish you can stock in your pantry. Here is something almost no doctor mentions when telling seniors to protect their bones. The most affordable calcium source in the American grocery store is not milk, not yogurt, and not cheese, but rather the soft edible bones tucked inside a can of bone and salmon. When salmon undergoes the canning process, the heat and pressure soften those bones so thoroughly that they crumble into the flesh and become almost invisible during a meal. You will not see them on your plate, and you will barely feel them on your tongue, yet they remain packed with calcium. A 3-ounce serving of bone and canned salmon delivers roughly 180 milligrams of calcium, while the same portion of fresh salmon, prepared without the bones, provides only about 36 milligrams. The canned version supplies roughly 5 times the calcium found in the fresh fillet that most people consider the gold standard. For anyone over 60, this carries far more weight than it might first appear. The aging body gradually loses its ability to absorb calcium efficiently, bone density slips a little every year, and hip fractures rank among the leading causes of permanent disability in older adults. What makes the calcium in canned salmon especially valuable is that it arrives bundled with vitamin D and phosphorus, the 2 nutrients the body actually requires to lock calcium into bone tissue, rather than leaving it drifting through the bloodstream. There is one important catch worth remembering. You only capture this benefit when you buy the bone-in version, because boneless canned salmon, which sits on most store shelves right next to the regular kind, removes those soft bones during processing. It saves you a tiny step of effort while quietly stripping away the single most valuable nutrient the can has to offer. Beyond calcium, canned salmon happens to deliver almost the exact combination of nutrients that doctors and dietitians repeatedly warn adults over 60 about missing. A single 100-gram portion supplies roughly 70% of your daily vitamin D requirement, and vitamin D deficiency ranks among the most common silent problems in older Americans, tied to bone loss, muscle weakness, and an increased risk of falling. The canning process actually concentrates vitamin D rather than destroying it, because the small amount of fat inside the can holds the vitamin securely in place. That same portion also provides a meaningful dose of vitamin B12, which the body relies on to keep nerves functioning properly and to prevent cognitive decline and the kind of memory problems that often signal early dementia risk. when the real culprit turns out to be a quiet B12 shortage that has been building for years. Then come the omega-3 fats, which arrive in generous amounts. A typical can of pink or sockeye salmon contains close to 1 full gram of combined EPA and DHA, the two specific omega-3 fats most heavily studied for heart disease prevention, stroke risk reduction, and reduced inflammation throughout the body. That single can delivers more than most Americans consume in an entire day, and you can spread it across toast or mix it into a salad in under a minute. One more critical nutrient deserves mention here: selenium. A single can provides roughly 40 micrograms of selenium, delivering over 70% of your daily requirement for this trace mineral that supports thyroid function and immune health, both of which become increasingly important as we age. Perhaps most importantly for seniors, that same can delivers 20 grams of complete protein, directly addressing sarcopenia, the age-related loss of muscle mass that affects up to 50% of adults over 80. While most people focus on the omega-3s, the high-quality protein in canned salmon may be its most valuable contribution to healthy aging. One important point of caution belongs here. While eating actual fish has been linked across many studies to better cardiovascular outcomes, recent research published in 2026 suggests that omega-3 supplements, the kind sold inside capsules, may not produce the same benefits, and in some older adults may even be linked to faster cognitive decline. The science continues to evolve, but for now, the safest conclusion is that whole foods like canned salmon behave very differently in the body than concentrated fish oil capsules, which means eating the fish itself remains the smarter and more conservative choice. Now we reach the parts of the can that the colorful marketing on the front label tends to leave out. The first genuine concern with canned salmon involves sodium, because a standard can of pink salmon carries anywhere from 300 to 600 milligrams of sodium, which adds up to a meaningful chunk of the daily limit recommended for adults with high blood pressure. For anyone managing hypertension, kidney issues, or fluid retention, that sodium load accumulates quickly when canned salmon becomes a daily habit rather than an occasional meal. Fortunately, this problem solves itself through two simple steps. The first involves looking for cans labeled "No Salt Added," which nearly every major brand now offers in the same aisle as the regular version. The second involves rinsing the salmon under cold water before eating it, because a quick rinse strips away a meaningful portion of the surface sodium without washing out the omega-3 fats or the calcium, both of which remain locked inside the flesh and bones rather than dissolved in the salty liquid. If your blood pressure runs in a healthy range, the regular version causes no problem in moderation. If you actively manage hypertension, the no salt added version becomes the safer choice, and the rinse step adds one final layer of protection on top. This concern surfaces most often inside viewer questions, and it deserves a careful, honest answer. For decades, canned foods of every kind were sealed using a thin lining made from a chemical called BPA, short for bisphenol A. BPA imitates the hormone estrogen inside the body, and accumulated research has connected it to a long list of possible health effects, ranging from hormonal disruption to certain cancers in animal studies. None of that science arrived as good news for anyone eating canned foods on a regular basis. Fortunately, the picture has shifted substantially over the last 10 years. According to the Can Manufacturers Institute, the trade group representing the canning industry, roughly 95% of food cans produced in the United States now contain no BPA in the lining whatsoever. Most major canned salmon brands have already transitioned to alternative coatings, and this counts as genuine progress. The remaining catch is that not all of those alternatives have been proven safer. Some companies have switched to a chemical called BPS, which behaves in the body much the way BPA does. Others rely on acrylic, polyester, or olefin coatings, several of which carry less safety data than most consumers would want before eating something every week. The Environmental Working Group, an independent watchdog organization, continues to flag the can lining issue as unresolved rather than completely solved. If this concern weighs on you, look for brands that explicitly label their cans as BPA-free, ideally those that also publish third-party testing data on their websites. Several smaller premium brands, including Safe Catch, a premium low-mercury seafood brand, Vital Choice, specializing in wild-caught sustainable fish, and Wild Planet, known for pole and line-caught tuna and salmon, openly share their testing results and make this information easy to find. The mainstream big brands continue to catch up, but you will need to read the can carefully to confirm where each one stands. The final concern worth addressing involves the long-running wild versus farm debate. Most canned salmon sold across the United States comes from wild-caught fish, usually pink or sockeye salmon harvested in Alaska, while some imported brands offer farmed Atlantic salmon in cans, often at a noticeably lower price point. On the question of mercury, both wild and farmed salmon test extremely low across studies, and some research even shows farmed salmon containing slightly less mercury than wild, because farmed fish live shorter lives and eat strictly controlled feed. On the separate question of other contaminants called PCBs, which are industrial pollutants that can build up inside fatty fish, wild salmon generally tests lower than farmed. The reason behind that difference comes down to geography, because farmed salmon often live near coastlines where industrial runoff concentrates heavily, while wild Alaskan salmon spends most of its life ranging through the open ocean, far from polluted shorelines. The practical takeaway settles itself quickly. If price is not the deciding factor, wild-caught pink or sockeye from Alaska remains the cleanest choice on the shelf. If you buy farmed for budget reasons, the health benefits still outweigh the small contaminant risk for most adults, provided you avoid making farmed Atlantic salmon a daily ritual. So we return to the original question that opened this video. Is canned salmon truly healthy, or is it quietly dangerous? The honest answer is that for the vast majority of adults over 60, canned salmon stands as one of the healthiest, most affordable, and most convenient protein sources you can keep in your pantry. It supplies more calcium than most dairy products, more vitamin D than nearly any other food in the grocery store, low mercury levels, generous omega-3 fats, essential selenium for immune health, and a clean protein profile that directly combats sarcopenia, all delivered for just a few dollars per can. The risks remain real but entirely manageable through smart shopping. Sodium gets handled by choosing no salt-added versions or rinsing before serving. The can lining issue has been mostly resolved at the industry level, with a small amount of remaining uncertainty that disappears when you choose brands publishing their own testing data. Wild versus farmed creates a genuine distinction, yet both fall well within established safe limits. Here is the simple buyer guide to carry with you on your next grocery trip. Choose wild-caught pink or sockeye whenever your budget allows it. Choose bone-in over boneless to capture the hidden calcium benefit. Choose no salt added if you actively watch your blood pressure. And choose brands that label themselves BPA-free, especially those willing to share third-party testing data on their website. 2 or 3 servings per week represents a reasonable target for most older adults. Eaten that way, canned salmon stops being a danger hiding inside your pantry and becomes one of the finest nutritional bargains the American grocery store has to offer, packing nearly everything an aging body needs into a single shelf-stable can. If this video helped you see canned salmon in a new light, give it a thumbs up to support the channel, share it with someone in your family who buys canned fish every week, and subscribe so you never miss future videos like this one. The next video on this channel will surprise even more of you, so make sure you do not miss it.